Hello, my name is Tony. You would be forgiven for wondering just how Joe Kidd isn't one of the greatest westerns ever made. Get a load of this. Clint Eastwood headlining, John Sturges directing from a screenplay by Elmore Leonard. Support cast including Robert Duvall, John Saxon, Don Stroud and Paul Koslow. Music by Lalo Schifrin. Cinematography by Bruce Surtees. That's more than enough to whet the appetite of and spark high expectations in any western movie fan. But, as is so often the case, it didn't quite work out the way anyone would reasonably imagine. The right ingredients in place, but somehow we ended up with a cake that was only half-baked. WTAF, or for those with acronym blindness, what the actual fuck? I'm going to straight up admit that I like Joe Kidd, film character and Eastwood's performance, but I don't love it. It doesn't inspire the same sort of joyous western-driven synapse-stimulating snap that The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, High Plains Drifter and Unforgiven do. And I can't help thinking, with a not insignificant level of regret, that it should have. In the small town of Sonora, New Mexico, Joe Kidd, Eastwood, is waking up in a jail cell handcuffed to a cot. At the same time, Mexican revolutionary and activist Luis Charmer and his peasant gang are assembling for a raid on the courthouse. As Joe is brought before the judge on charges of poaching and drunken disorderly conduct, Charmer's armed mob burst in to air grievances about their land rights being misappropriated by gringo carpetbaggers and hold the judge and the legal system to account. This sets off a chain of events culminating in ruthless landowner Frank Harlan, Robert Duvall and his goons hitting town with an aim to forming a posse to hunt down and kill Charmer and anyone else who gets in their way. Joe, who was an ex-bounty hunter and tracker, now small-time rancher, is offered a job by Harlan to lead the posse. Initially he declines, but when Charmer's band raid his ranch, tying up his employee and friend with barbed wire, he soon changes his mind. The rest of the film focuses on the hunt, leading to a slam-bang finale involving a steam locomotive and a lot of gunplay. First, the good. Then the bad, then the ugly. The good. The setup is fine. There was a run on hunt, chase, kill westerns in the early 70s, like Chateau's Land, The Hunting Party, Valdez is Coming, Lawman and Big Jake, because it's a solid and substantial basis upon which to build thrill, suspense and action. Joe Kidd fits in comfortably enough to that niche. Bruce Surtees' camera work is absolutely beautiful and the scenery is breathtaking in places. A lot of mountain ranges though, professional craft work as you would expect. It's not Lalo Schifrin's best score, no classic western theme that will stay with you, but it's not half bad, again as you would expect. Eastwood was under the weather during filming with a bronchial condition, but it doesn't show. His performance is suitably energetic, and he makes Joe Kidd an interesting character. Prickly, unpredictable, a nice blend of laconic cynicism with an added propensity for casual violence and cavalier murder. Very matter-of-fact about such things, a marksman, good with a gun, dodgy moral compass. Check. Appealing anti-heroic stylings. Robert Duvall is never less than watchable no matter what he's in, well cast as the callous Harlan, the villain of the piece, and he's ably supported by two stock 60s and 70s screen heavies, Don Stroud as Lamar, who was outclassed by Joe at every turn, and Paul Koslow as Roy, who takes great delight in Lamar's continued failure to best his adopted nemesis. Their interplay is good fun. John Saxon, an actor of Italian descent, was cast as a Hispanic character a few times in films and TV shows because he was. And here he is again, convincingly enough, as a quite arrogant and egotistical idealist with an axe to grind. Leonard's script is tight and snappy in construction with some nice lines of dialogue here and there, especially for Eastwood to deliver in his usual terse and minimalist manner. It's not so smart in the content stakes though, because the narrative has a somewhat indistinct way with character motivations, and some puzzling choices it has them make. The action sequences are handled well enough, and Eastwood is right at home. From the outset it's quickly established that Joe Kidd is not the sort of person you want to fuck with. He's held in a cell with two of Charmer's men, one of whom mocks him and moves a cup of coffee out of his reach because he's handcuffed to a cot. When released by deputies, Kidd slings a saucepan of beans over the man and follows up by smashing the pan into his face, rendering him unconscious. I laughed out loud first time round. Great scene, delightful introduction to the lead character. The film touches on progress, but mostly in the weaponry used. An automatic Mauser pistol toted by Lamar, long-range rifles with telescopic sights employed by Harlan sharpshooter Mingo James Wainwright. The climax whereby Joe drives a steam train through a saloon before taking on Harlan's men is a classy set piece, but unfortunately is overall too soon, and the film sort of abruptly ends as though, like the train, it ran out of steam and rail. Or maybe a curt full stop was the sort of directorial thing Sturges was going for. Which brings us on to the bad. Director John Sturges had a rare reputation and impressive portfolio, evidencing his ability to turn in classic pieces of mainstream cinematic art. Bad Day at Black Rock, The Great Escape, Ice Station Zebra. More than that, he was highly experienced in the western genre. To his credit, his gunfight at the OK Corral, The Magnificent Seven, The Hallelujah Trail, The Hour of the Gun. With Joe Kidd, though, his usually bold, sweeping, dynamic approach is severely muted, seemingly beset by listlessness and lassitude. There doesn't seem to be much enthusiasm in execution being demonstrated. It's not a long movie, and it doesn't strike as a big movie either. Gives a distinct impression of being very small scale and a bit undernourished, like a made-for-TV effort, but on a bigger budget with some star power. Lastly, the ugly. Duval is the evil money-grubbing villain out to eradicate his problems with bullets and terrorist tactics. Saxon is the righteous man striving to repatriate his people with the land that was originally theirs, and Eastwood is the anti-heroic Johnny in the middle with a shifting agenda. Duval feels right, it's clear what he's up to and why. Saxon, not so much. He doesn't elicit much sympathy. When Duval and his men take over a small village, imprison the locals in the church, and threaten to shoot 5 of them every hour until Charmer gives himself up and descends from the mountains where he's hiding out, Charmer doesn't bat an eye. He's happy to remain posturing and pontificating where he is and let the people die. He and his cause are more important than their lives. He's like the Prince Harry of Mexican revolutionaries, El Hazmat. Joe initially joins up with Harlan due to some dissatisfaction at Charmer and his gang raiding his ranch and wrapping his employee up in barbed wire. At the village, he switches sides, escapes, rides into the mountains, and holds Charmer at gunpoint, insisting he's going to take him back to town and turn him over to the sheriff. He can fight his cause in court. Instantly, Charmer, who 2 minutes earlier was prepared to let a village full of people die so that he might live, suddenly agrees to go along with the plan. What a good idea. Just like that, as Tommy Cooper would have said. This lost me, it's jarring and sloppy, a poor narrative mechanism to drive the story to the concluding events. I've tried over the years, but I just can't make peace with it. It's been suggested that by the 70s Sturges was winding down. He'd lost his fire and edge, and the quality of his work maybe supports that suggestion. It has further been suggested that there was a clash between Malpaso, Eastwood's production company, and Sturges, who was used to doing things his way, and this led to the director simply wanting to get the job over and done. The truth of this is up for debate. Just what I've heard, folks, so it's hearsay, but still might have bearing. There is much to like and enjoy in Joe Kidd, the repeated attacks on the arrogant but dumb Lamar. Joe grabs his belt buckle and throws him down a flight of hotel stairs, later whacks him in the throat with a shotgun butt, and later still opens a trapdoor when he's on guard duty in a church tower, so he falls through and breaks his neck.
He's dead.
I believe you. Send up his gun and hat, will you?
Stella Garcia's feisty turn as Helen, Charmer's key female acolyte. Why are senoritas in Western so damn sexy, even if they're not what could be considered classically beautiful? Maybe it's because they're not what could be considered classically beautiful, but smouldering, earthy and dangerous poetry in motion. The scenery, the music, the nonchalant violence and action scenes. It's all decent enough stuff. But is it enough to fully redeem it and elevate it to greatness? No, not really, and not likely. However, something keeps me returning to it. I've seen it more times than I care to remember. Maybe it's in the hope it will magically turn into the great Western movie I think it should have been. Or maybe because it's an undemanding, easy watch sort of underdog in the Eastwood canon that requires little more than remote attention and rewards that attention with straightforward and stress-free entertainment. It may be routine, but any film starring Eastwood and Duval, written by Elmore Leonard and directed by John Sturges, is never going to be all bad or without some innate charm and appeal. And that's Joe Kidd for you. Thanks for your time and attention, pilgrims. It is most rightly appreciated. I know I keep saying this, but if you can find the time to hit like or dislike, indulge me with a comment, or flatter me by subscribing, I'd be mighty grateful. There'll be another along soon, so keep vigilant. Adios for now.